We are officially 10 days away from Dustin Poirier's retirement fight at UFC 318, and overall, this isn't a super stacked card. Rest of the main card leaves a little bit to be desired, but the UFC have tried to add some last-minute fights here. Overall, there's a lot of depth, 14 total fights, but in this video, I'm going to be going through, breaking down every single matchup, main card, and the prelims, picking a winner and how I think they get it done. As always, would love to hear your thoughts down below. If you agree with me, disagree with me, let me hear it. Also, there will be timestamps in the description if you guys want to jump around to specific matchups. And then also the bout order for this card has been all over the place. So I believe this is what it's at right now. Obviously could change within the next 10 days. But we are going to start off with Carli Judice taking on Nicolle Caliari. And Judice has really been an absolute dog very early on in her UFC run here. She was a part of one of the best fights on the Contender Series in a fight that she lost by split decision. Then she had a fight of the night in her UFC debut, another fight that she lost by very close split decision. And then her most recent fight, she was done with these, back and forth wars, went out there, picked up a round one knockout win, and earned herself a performance bonus. So back-to-back potential fight of the nights if there was one for the Contender Series, and then a performance bonus. Pretty awesome start from an entertainment perspective. And she can just go out there and put together insane volume. In those back-to-back decisions, she landed 168 and 169 significant strikes. That would be otherworldly for one singular 3-round fight, and she did it in back-to-back matchups. She has also shown some decent takedown defense, has been taken down a couple of times, but has been able to get back up to her feet, hasn't been controlled for too long. On the other side here with Nicolle Caliari, she is 8-3 as a pro. She was, pretty much a dominant finisher pre-UFC. Hasn't won a fight by decision, 5 knockout wins, 3 submission wins, primarily a grappler, picked up a submission win on the Contender Series, really went to her grappling in her debut, came up just short with a split decision loss. It was actually against the same woman that Judice lost to on the Contender Series. I want to say it's Ernestskada Karaskada or something. I'm sure I'm butchering it, but they do have that common opponent. Both of them lost to her by split decision. So she went 3 for 14 on those takedowns in that UFC debut. She is going to have the smaller frame in this matchup. She's 5'3" with a 62-inch reach compared to Judice, who is 5'7" with a 68-inch reach. I do think this is going to be a clear-cut striker versus grappler matchup. I think Caliari is going to come in. She is going to be grappling heavy right out of the gate. And I do think she could potentially bank some rounds with control time, but I am going to lean towards the pace and activity of Judice in this matchup. We saw with that common opponent, that's kind of the way that she was able to take down Caliari or beat her in that matchup, was she was able to stuff the takedowns, she was able to outpoint her on the feet, rack up a lot of volume. I think we are going to see Judice do that in this matchup. So I'm going to go with Judice by decision. Then in this next matchup, we have Bruno Ferreira taking on Jackson McVey. These two guys have a combined 21 pro fights. They have gone to 0 decisions. Both these guys have either been finished or finished every single one of their fights. Ferreira obviously is killer be killed, 9 KO wins, 4 submission wins. He's been knocked out and submitted in his 2 pro losses. He has a 4-2 record in the UFC, primarily a striker, but you definitely can't sleep on his jiu-jitsu. Very capable in that department. Very stocky build for middleweight, 5'10" with a 72-inch reach, but he is very explosive. He is very powerful. He has round 1 knockout wins against Gregory Rodriguez, Phil Hawes, and Dustin Stoltzfus. On the other side here with McVey, he is making his UFC debut, and he is kind of an interesting guy here entering the UFC. He is a very big middleweight. So you have kind of an undersized guy in Ferreira, and then a very big middleweight here with McVey, 6'4" with a 77-inch reach. He is 6-0, so very, very inexperienced, only 26 years old, but he's shown to be pretty well-rounded on the regional scene. 3 knockout wins, 3 submission wins. He's, like I said, very, very green. He's never been out of round 1 in his pro career, and 5 of his 6 fights took place in under 1 minute and 30 seconds. He is a southpaw, really uses that frame, throws high kicks, really nasty knees in the clinch. The issue here is just he is so untested. I know I've said it a few times, but 6 total fights, such limited cage experience compared to Bruno. And so I'm expecting Bruno to come out, fight southpaw, kind of limit the kicks of McVey. I think both these guys could be live for a finish. Even though McVey, doesn't have the same experience, doesn't have the same resume, when you're going out there ripping head kicks, firing knees up the middle against a smaller middleweight, like you could certainly find the knockout shot. I just have to have more confidence here in Bruno Ferreira. He's faced the much better competition. He's been tested by much better guys. So I'm going to go with Bruno Ferreira round 1 KO. I do think the betting odds on this one are a little bit crazy. Like I want to say Bruno's like minus 600 or greater. He might go out there and just nuke McVey, but McVey's not a bum. He's dangerous, has that finishing upside, but I do have to side with Bruno in this matchup. Then we're going to move up to heavyweight, where we have Ryan Spann taking on Lukasz Brzeski. Ryan Spann lost his most recent fight up at heavyweight, had moved up from light heavyweight, was knocked out by Waldo Cortez Acosta. He's been on a rough stretch here, lost 4 of his last 5. So is Brzeski. He is 1-5 in the UFC. He has been knocked out in round 1 of his last 3 losses. And Brzeski kind of just has this rough combination of not being super powerful at heavyweight, not being super durable, and then also not having great grappling. So he actually has pretty solid cardio, can put together some decent volume at heavyweight, but when these other dudes can just land one big shot on you and you're asleep and you have to just outpoint these dudes for 3 rounds, and you don't have great takedown defense, it's just not a great skill set to be super successful. He's been dropped in 4 of his 6 UFC fights. He has not landed a single knockdown in those 6 matchups. And then his takedown defense is all the way down at 36%. Now, Ryan Spann is not someone you really want to trust. He can be unreliable, but he also is very, very dangerous. 6 of his 8 UFC wins are by finish. 5 of them came in the first round. He hits very hard and also has a very, very impressive guillotine. Not sure we're going to see that in this fight because I don't think Brzeski's going to be shooting on him, but something I did want to mention, I do think there's a pathway where this fight goes long. Ryan Spann maybe blows a lot of energy early on, and Brzeski could find a late finish or pick up a decision win, but I have to lean towards just the explosiveness, the danger factor of Ryan Spann. I'm going to go Ryan Spann round 1 KO. Then dropping 1 weight class, we have Jimmy Crute taking on Marcin Prachnio. And Jimmy Crute has been on one of the weirdest, kind of toughest stretches here. In his last 5 fights, he is 0-3-2. So he has 3 losses, all by finish, and then 2 draws. He has faced pretty solid competition. Anthony Smith, Jamal Hill. 2 of those fights were against Alonzo Menefield, who just turned back a very solid prospect. And then the most recent fight was against Rodolfo Bellato. Crute has a pretty solid skill set. He hits hard on the feet. Very good jiu-jitsu for the light heavyweight division. Cardio isn't great, can fade. And then on the feet, we have seen him struggle with guys who can land that calf kick on him. Anthony Smith, that fight was stopped because he was beat up so badly to the calf. And then also Bellato was able to take advantage of it in his most recent fight. On the other side here with Prachnio, he has a pretty unique skill set for light heavyweight. Karate base, really impressive kicker. I think it was his most recent fight against Modestas Bukauskas. He was caught, clipped on the feet, was hurt, kind of backed up to the cage. Bukauskas was pretty much in the pocket with him. They were in and out of the clinch. And Prachnio somehow landed a lead leg question mark kick from incredibly close range. I've never seen that happen in a fight before, and was pretty much able to turn the table at that moment because he was hurt. All of a sudden he clips Prachnio, and now Prachnio is Bukauskas is on the defensive. The issue here for Prachnio is that he does not have great takedown defense, down at 53%. Also doesn't have great durability. He's typically at a power disadvantage in these matchups. So he was knocked out in his first 3 UFC losses. I want to say that was his first 3 UFC fights, knocked out in all 3 of them. Kind of a miracle he was able to stay on the roster. But then he, picked up some solid wins. In his last 3 losses, he has been out-grappled in all 3 of those. And so I think Prachnio in this matchup does have the ability to potentially stay on the outside, kind of beat up the legs, use his kicks, fight from range. Jimmy Crute, not a huge fighter here in this weight class, but I also think that Jimmy Crute just has like a major grappling advantage in this matchup. And I don't think Prachnio really has the power to deter Crute from just kind of, wrestling super aggressively. And so I am going to lean towards Jimmy Crute here. I think he racks up some control time in round 1, takes some of the sting, lowers the cardio of Prachnio, and I think Crute finds the round 2 submission win. Now moving down to 170, we have Adam Fugitt taking on Islam Dulatov, and this fight does kind of look like a mismatch. Dulatov is a super interesting prospect, 26 years old, big for this weight class, 6'3" with a 75-inch reach. He has an 11-1 pro record, and his only loss came in his MMA debut. He had a nasty win on the Contender Series, landed a huge elbow, just folded this dude out cold. And then all 11 of his pro wins are by finish, well-rounded, 6 knockouts, 5 submissions. And then I'm not saying he's fought like elite competition outside the UFC, but he has fought in legit promotions, had at least one fight in both Brave and Octagon, so some decent experience against, better than just like random regional competition. For Fugitt here, he's also a pretty big welterweight, 6'1", 77-inch reach, 2-2 in the UFC. Pre-UFC, he was kind of known as a finisher, hasn't really shown that same upside against UFC competition. He did pick up a finish, but he has 0 knockdowns. He's been dropped 3 times so far in 4 fights. I just think Dulatov is pretty much going to be better everywhere. I think especially on the feet, he's going to be quicker. He's going to be a lot more dangerous, more powerful. I think Dulatov gets this one done early. I'm going Dulatov round 1 KO. Then moving up to middleweight, we have Ateba Gautier taking on Robert Valentin. I'm a big fan of Gautier. I think he has a ton of potential in this weight class. 7-1 record, 1-0 in the UFC. 6 of his 7 wins are by KO. When you just look at the physical tools that this guy has, it's tough to not be high on him. He's only 23 years old, 6'4" with a 81-inch reach at 185. Like, that's a frame where you could see him being a heavyweight in the future. People have called him Mini Ngannou because he's from Cameroon. Obviously, not really mini. The dude's still a tank, but I guess smaller than Francis. He's extremely explosive, hits very hard, but he has a level of patience that you don't really see out of dudes with his physical tools and at his age. Like, a lot of these guys, when you're like young 20s, you have this freakish power. You clip a dude, you rock him a little bit. These guys go crazy. They freak out. They wing a ton of punches. They gas themselves out. That is not what Gautier does. Now, he does have some questionable takedown defense, but I still am very high on him long term. I think he'll be a big player in this weight class. In the future, not sure how long it's going to take him. Like, the dude's only 23, might not be hitting his prime for like 6, 7, 8 years. But I do think he'll be definitely a player in the future. Then for Valentin, he is 0-2 in the UFC, was pretty grappling heavy before he got into the promotion, but has been out-grappled in both of his UFC losses. 10-5 record, 6 submission wins, 3 knockouts. I do think he's going to come into this matchup with a wrestle-heavy game plan. I don't think he's going to feel comfortable trying to stand on the feet against Gautier. I think it's possible that Valentin has some early success with the wrestling. Like I said, that is a potential weakness for Gautier, but I do trust Gautier to work back to his feet, use his athleticism, and I do think he finds the finish, and I think he gets it done early. I'm going to go Gautier round 1 KO. In this next matchup, we have a welterweight fight between Francisco Prado and Nikolay Veretennikov. I don't really understand why Prado is staying at 170. He's 5'10" listed. I think that might be generous. I think he might be shorter than that with a 69-inch reach. That's just not a frame you want to have at welterweight. And you look at his last fight at 155, he struggled with the range of Daniel Zellhuber, funny enough, also on this card. But like, Zellhuber's a big lightweight, but when you struggle to close the distance on that dude, moving up probably is not the best bet. He moved up, took on Jake Matthews, lost that fight very clearly, 30-27. Prado has a 1-3 UFC record. Pre-UFC, he was super dangerous. All of his wins are by finish, 6 knockout wins, 6 submission wins. The dude's durable. Like, all 3 of his losses have come by decision. He has not been finished in his pro career. He has had some issues with his grappling kind of translating to UFC level competition. Like I said, 6 submission wins before the UFC. He has a 9% takedown accuracy in the UFC. That has not been cutting it. I do think this could be a potential matchup where he could use that wrestling, use that grappling. That has been a weakness for Veretennikov. He is 0-2 in the UFC, coming off a fight where he was dominated by Austin Vandeford, specifically in the grappling. He was controlled for 7 minutes and 21 seconds of a 9-minute and 13-second fight and absorbed 102 total strikes in that matchup. He was also out-grappled by Michael Morales on the Contender Series. Kind of interesting that Morales opted to grapple him, where in the UFC he's been super striking heavy, but I guess, goes to show the weakness in Veretenikov's game. But on the feet, he is a solid striker, has a big frame for the weight class, works the body well, fairly patient, pretty defensively responsible. And so in this matchup, I know Francisco Prado is the favorite. I lean towards the underdog here. Like I mentioned, Prado's been super ineffective as a grappler. And even though Veretennikov has shown some issues there, like Vandeford is a guy who used to fight at 185 in Bellator. You're comparing that, and like a very good grappler, comparing him, or like a Michael Morales, who's like a physical freak. I don't think those guys are comparable to Francisco Prado, who's had issues taking dudes down, like down at 155, and is going to be undersized for this weight class. So on the feet, I think Veretennikov can stay at range, kind of pick at Prado. I do think Prado probably has the power advantage in this matchup, but I am going to lean towards Veretennikov to win this fight by decision. Moving up to 185, we have Marvin Vettori taking on Brendan Allen. Right now, I think this fight is listed on the prelims. Don't really understand that, but it is what it is. Could definitely change. And when I looked at the betting odds for this fight, I was pretty shocked. Brendan Allen is almost a 3-1 favorite. Now, I'm not saying that Marvin Vettori is anything crazy or like a future champion or anything, but overall, like, he is kind of a tough out. He is very durable. He has solid cardio, and he's also a pretty capable grappler. So, like, he's not amazing anywhere, but overall, like, the dude's kind of just a tank, and he's not someone that's just going to roll over in any matchup. He's never been knocked down in the UFC. He took some absolute monster shots against Jared Cannonier and somehow never got dropped. Like, Cannonier beat the crap out of him in that second round in their matchup, and Vettori hung in there. He's also gone 5 rounds 6 times in the UFC, and he's won 3 of those. So, like, capable cardio, like I mentioned. And then 69% takedown defense isn't great, but he's still overall pretty tough to hold down. So you might be able to take him down, but good luck kind of laying on him and just getting him to sit down and get controlled. On the other side with Brendan Allen, I do think he's one of the better grapplers at middleweight. Before his back-to-back losses, he was on a 7-fight win streak, with 5 of those wins coming by rear naked choke, and submitted like legit grapplers in Paul Craig and Andre Muniz. I feel like these last 2 losses have really shown some fight IQ issues. Both of these matchups against legit dudes like Anthony Hernandez, Nasruddin Imavov, these fights were winnable for Brendan Allen. They were up for grabs. Round 3 against Imavov, 1-1 going into that final round, and Brendan Allen opted to continue to wrestle unsuccessfully, ended up putting himself in some bad spots where he took some damage, despite the fact that he was kind of holding his own on the feet. Then in that Anthony Fluffy Hernandez fight, he had some opportunities to take position over submission. He gave up some good spots, and I think he certainly could have won that fight if he wasn't so aggressive trying to find a finish with a sub. And then even before that, he went to a very close, somewhat controversial split decision against Chris Curtis. So I'm not saying that Brendan Allen's terrible or anything, but the fact that he's close to a 3-1 favorite against Vettori seems a little wild to me. I don't disagree with him as the favorite. I just think with the fight IQ issues he's shown, it's not like he's just blowing out these dudes that Vettori would struggle with. And so I do think that Brendan Allen has the skill advantage. Vettori, like I said, super durable, not going to quit on himself, but not really special in any specific area. But I don't really think Vettori is going to throw away rounds, and I think Brendan Allen kind of could do that. What if he lands a takedown on Vettori, and all of a sudden he's trying to jump the gilly or something like that, and all of a sudden Vettori's going to be like, all right, I'll just sit on top and bank this round. So I think this fight's going to be closer than the odds might say. Maybe I'm wrong, and Brendan Allen just goes out, fights with a super smart game plan, but I just don't think we've seen that, and I don't think Vettori's just going to roll over. So I am picking Brendan Allen here, but I think it's very, very close decision. I'll go Brendan Allen by split decision. I'll call it to be that close. So I am going with Brendan Allen, but expecting a very competitive matchup. Then one of the most exciting fights on this card, we have Kyler Phillips taking on Vinicius Oliveira. This round one has like round of the year potential. These are two extremely explosive bantamweight prospects, both guys who come out very hot in round one. Kyler Phillips has a 6-2 record in the UFC. He's coming off a pretty disappointing loss to Rob Font. This was kind of his opportunity to jump up in the rankings, pick up, a big high profile win, and he fell short. Kyler is a very kick-heavy striker, super creative, throws a lot of spinning attacks. Like I said, very explosive, can switch stances very well through his combinations. And he's a competent grappler, has some submission threat. Did go to the wrestling early on in that Rob Font fight. The biggest concern for Kyler Phillips is just the cardio. He went, like I said, wrestling heavy against Rob Font. Didn't look like he exerted a ton of energy. He racked up a lot of control time, was in a good spot, and was just completely gassed after round one. You look at even some of the fights that he's won, he lost the third round against Raoni Barcelos. He lost the third round against Song Yadong. He had a dominant round one against Julian Paiva. It certainly should have been a 10-8. He kind of got screwed in the decision, but then he gassed out after one round, lost the second and the third. Of course, judges are stingy with the 10-8s, and he ends up losing that fight. So it's been a consistent issue throughout his entire UFC career where he will fade when you get into the second, especially when you get into the third round. And so for Lokdog here, 3-0 UFC record, coming off of back-to-back decision wins. In his previous 23 fights before those last two, he only went to decision twice. He has 16 knockout wins, 2 submission wins. He's going to go out there. He is going to wing big shots, throws very powerful kicks. He's not super technical. He can overthrow. He can be countered. Like I said, he's not super sharp, not super tight, but he is very explosive and he is very, very unpredictable. We've also seen him fade a little bit, but he fades in a different way where he'll just get sloppier and looser, but he'll still go out there and throw bombs. Like that Saeed Nurmagomedov fight, both of those dudes were very, very tired, but he's still been able to win round 3 in that Saeed matchup. And he took round 3 against Ricky Simone, who's someone who's known for having very, very good cardio. So I think both these dudes are live for a finish early on. I just have way more confidence in Lokdog Vinicius Oliveira if this fight does go into deeper water. They both eat each other's best shots when we're getting into late round 2. Round 3, who do I trust more? I trust Vinicius Oliveira. And so, like I said, I think both could find a finish. I'm going to go with Vinicius Oliveira by decision. 2 dangerous dudes, think they're going to take each other's best shots, and I'm going to guess it goes the distance. Obviously would not hate a finish in that fight. Then at lightweight, we have Michael Johnson taking on Daniel Zellhuber. For Michael Johnson, he is known for having one of the funnier resumes in all of MMA. He has some extremely elite wins like Dustin Poirier, Edson Barbosa, Tony Ferguson, and then he also just has some super questionable losses where it's how could someone with the skill set to beat those dudes lose to some of the other names that he has lost to? He's a southpaw striker, very boxing heavy, going to go out, wing very powerful shots. He is kind of reckless when he does unload with those combinations. He'll lose his footing sometimes, he'll overextend, but if he lands, you could be in trouble like we saw in his last fight against Otman Zaitar. I was actually at that fight card, so that was super cool to see in person from Michael Johnson. On the other side here with Daniel Zellhuber, he is a young lightweight prospect, 26 years old, coming off a fight of the night split decision loss to Esteban Ribovics. Since his UFC debut, where he was just kind of gun shy, he has had very strong output in his fights, landed at least 120 significant strikes in back-to-back 3-round fights. Big frame for the weight class, 6'1", 77-inch reach. Doesn't really optimize and maximize his range, I think, as much as he potentially could, but he does have nice kicks, will work his knees up the middle, but he did kind of struggle with the blitzes of the smaller Esteban Ribovics, who was able to explode into range and land some big shots. Did have some answers, he dropped Ribovics with an elbow on one of those explosions, but Ribovics was the guy who landed more damage, had a very dominant round 3. Michael Johnson is always going to be live to land a big shot and find a knockout win, but I do prefer just the younger, more technical Daniel Zellhuber. Also think he has the durability edge, just way less tread on his tires. I'm going to pick Zellhuber by decision. Michael Johnson's durability has been weird, where like overall he's taken some pretty solid shots against some very good dudes. But then you look at like the Diego Ferreira fight and just got completely nuked, put out cold. I do think Zellhuber is going to be, not going to say gun shy, but I think he's going to be patient. I don't think he's going to want to like come in recklessly and run into a big shot. So I think Zellhuber outpoints him and wins a decision. Just more well-rounded on the feet, can use his kicks in a way that Michael Johnson cannot. Then we have a really interesting fight here at 145 between Dan Ige and Patricio Pitbull. I remember I made a video after Pitbull's last fight where I was like matchmaking all the dudes on the main card, and this is the fight that I wanted to see. So I love this matchmaking here. It's kind of like a mirror matchup here. You have two very like stocky, hard-hitting dudes. Both guys actually coming off fights where they kind of struggled with rangy, lengthier strikers. Dan Ige won his fight, struggled in the first couple of rounds, came back from the round 3 KO against Sean Woodson. And then Patricio Pitbull had a much rougher performance, although against a tougher guy, in a decision loss to Yair Rodriguez. So Pitbull has real power in both hands. 36 wins, actually has 12 wins by knockout, 12 wins by submission, and 12 wins by decision. Also has a very impressive guillotine. Not sure that's going to come into play here. I don't think Dan Ige is going to be shooting on him, but thought I'd mention it. He has lost 3 of his last 4 and is kind of getting up there in age at 38 years old, which isn't great. Like, I didn't really like the way he was getting talked about in his debut, where the commentators were kind of trying to pull like, you come in and you face the best and sometimes you can't hang. Like, this is not prime Patricio Pitbull, and I'm not even saying that like prime Pitbull comes in and like is beating Volk or Aldo. Like, I certainly don't think he is, but like this is not the prime Patricio we are getting here in the UFC, and that is something we have to consider. Like, this is not the dude with all the highlight reel knockouts that we were seeing 5, 6, 7 years ago in Bellator. Dan Ige, definitely more in his like prime age range. I believe he's 33 years old. Also has very impressive power in both hands. We've seen him land that straight right against Andre Fili. Super vicious knockout. Same thing, I think it was Gavin Tucker, that super quick KO. And then also the left hook is nice. We saw that against Damon Jackson. Dropped Nate Landwehr with it a couple of times. I just think in this mirror matchup, you have Ige, who's younger, less tread on the tires. I think at this point, he probably has the durability edge. And so I think he could definitely hurt Patricio Pitbull, but I think he ends up winning a decision. Like I said, both guys hit very hard, could both be live for a finish. My call is going to be Ige drops him, but ends up winning a fight by decision. I do think there's some risk here where Ige goes out, lands a big punch early on, and then just decides to load up for the rest of the fight and ends up losing the next 2, but I'll still ride with him here by decision. Then we're going to have a matchup between Kevin Holland and Daniel Rodriguez. I think this was one of the fights that was added fairly recently. This actually was originally scheduled for a UFC 279, and then we had the crazy shakeup where Khamzat Chimaev couldn't make weight. They turned it into Kevin Holland versus Khamzat, where Kevin Holland kind of got screwed there. And then they made Daniel Rodriguez versus Li Jinliang. That was all the way back in September of 2022. And since then, Kevin Holland has fought 10 times. I just thought that was kind of a crazy fact to throw in there. I do really like Kevin Holland staying down at 170. He's just so much better in this weight class. The frame is, bigger relative to his competitor, 6'3", 81-inch reach. He can actually stuff takedowns in this weight class, and he has power in both weight classes, but I think it's even more prevalent in welterweight, especially when he actually has more opportunities to land those shots because he's not just laying on his back, getting control grappled for 25 minutes like we saw in a few fights up at middleweight. He is coming off of back-to-back wins at 170, coming off a submission win against Vicente Luque. For Daniel Rodriguez here, he is coming off a KO win against Santiago Ponzinibbio, staying active. That took place only a couple of months ago in May. D-Rod has a super boxing heavy style, always going to be game in fights, high volume, 7.39 significant strikes per minute. Pretty durable throughout his career. Only knockout loss came to Ian Gary. Pretty much just a striker, not someone who has a ton of wrestling upside, especially against Holland, whose, like I said, takedown defense has been good at 170. I kind of just feel like this is a tough matchup for Daniel Rodriguez. Kevin Holland is just going to be the much rangier guy. I also think he has the power advantage in this matchup. And I also think like maybe D-Rod tries to wrestle, but like Kevin Holland jiu-jitsu is very dangerous, especially at welterweight. So I think Holland is just going to win this fight everywhere. I think he ends up finding a knockout in the second round. And I believe this is the co-main event. Questionable bout order here with Paulo Costa versus Roman Kopylov here as the co-main, but from like an entertainment perspective, this fight could definitely deliver. The issue here for Paulo Costa is you just never know what version of him you're going to get. Like, this is a dude who is an absolute marauder, kind of running through the rankings to get to that title shot against Izzy. And then after that KO loss to Israel Adesanya, it really just seems like his confidence got nuked. He's still shown some flashes of being that like super aggressive, fun fighter. Like, he was taking it to Luke Rockhold in a war, had a pretty competitive fight with Robert Whittaker, but his most recent performance was rough. That fight against Sean Strickland last June was just not great. Like, he's at his best when he's going out there, just walking dudes down, ripping huge shots, digging to the body, landing his big kicks. And he went from a guy who was walking down Yoel Romero, like no one walks down Yoel Romero, to all of a sudden he's like circling around the cage against Sean Strickland. Like, you're willing to walk down arguably the most dangerous dude to ever fight in the UFC, and then Sean Strickland, who probably is the least finishing upside of anyone he's fought, and he's circling, trying to like fight this super perfect fight in a 5-rounder. Just crazy the way he's kind of fallen off as of late. His opponent here, Roman Kopylov, is a very dangerous striker, 6-3 record in the UFC. 12 of his 14 pro wins are by knockout. Very powerful kicks, southpaw striker, works the body very, very well. I've seen a lot of people, I think the general sentiment is that this is going to be like a dominant Kopylov win. And I'm not saying that like Paulo Costa should be like the huge favorite or like Kopylov shouldn't be favored in this matchup. I just think people have gotten a little bit over their skis when it comes to Roman Kopylov. He was just in a very competitive fight with Chris Curtis. Like, it was a close fight, 1-1 going into that third round. Obviously, he lands the head kick with like 1 second left to win the fight. But I think when you look at Paulo Costa and you look at his style, that like marauder type style I was talking about before the Izzy fight, I think if you're going to strike with Kopylov, that's probably the style you want to use, where you apply the pressure, you kind of stifle the kicks, you really get in his grill so he's not at kicking range, and you just turn it into a dogfight. Now, we know Costa has that ability. Will he actually do it in a fight? I don't know. We did see post Sean Strickland. He obviously was pretty upset with his performance. He kind of talked about how like he would go back to having this aggressive style, not worrying about the points, not worrying about his cardio. And it's easier said than done, but I do think that is the path to victory in this fight. And so it might be dumb. I do like Paulo Costa. I almost want to wish this into existence. I think we're going to see a vintage Paulo Costa performance. Now, if he goes out there and fights super passive and just gets melted, I will feel like an idiot for this pick. But I think he has to feel like he's fighting for his job. I think he has the ability to go out there and get into that dogfight. Like I said, crowd the kicks of Roman Kopylov and pick up a win. I am going to be going with a round 2 knockout win for Paulo Costa. And then we have officially arrived at the main event. Now, if you want a more in-depth breakdown for this fight, I already have one posted on the YouTube channel, but we'll obviously still give my thoughts here for this overall video. Both of these dudes, obviously elite strikers. One thing I kind of harped on a lot in the like longer breakdown was both of these guys have very solid lead hands, but they use it in very different ways. So Dustin Poirier is a right-handed southpaw, so he is a super powerful left hook. Holloway, not going to use that lead hand to land like these huge shots, but has a very nice jab, uses that jab to feint, land some bigger shots. Also has kind of implemented a slapping lead hook, which can set up some of his bigger shots also. I talked about how he kind of made that switch after the first Volk fight, where Volk was kind of exposing him by just countering that jab, like that heavy jab with a leg kick, and just really destroyed him to the legs. Looking at some of the takeaways from their first 2 fights, I'm just tossing out the first fight. Like, they were 20 and 23 years old. Like, these dudes are just in very, very different places in their careers. And so in that second fight, though, I think the big takeaway was just the power advantage for Dustin Poirier were like, they were pretty even on the significant strikes, but you could just tell that when Poirier was landing, he was landing the more impactful shots. Now, I'm still going to give Dustin Poirier the power advantage in this matchup, but I think some people are talking about like, it's going to be the same thing it was in that second fight, and Dustin's just going to land these huge shots, and Max Holloway has no ability to hurt Dustin. Max Holloway is actually committed to moving up to 155. This is not Max that's holding the title at 145. Like, he is now a lightweight. We've also seen him have pretty much a masterclass against Justin Gaethje, another obviously elite lightweight. And I know people are going to point to like the one punch power, like potential one punch power from the like last second point to the ground, KO with 1 second left. But that's really not the power I'm interested in. Like, same thing with the Korean zombie knockout. Like, if someone's going to sprint at you with their chin up in the air and you land an overhand, like even if you have pillow fists, you're still probably going to hurt them pretty badly. Max Holloway stung Justin Gaethje and had him rocked on the feet multiple times before the eventual knockout, and not just like them two winging punches, like him just in legit exchanges, kind of sitting down on his punches, landing some really solid shots. Both these guys are coming off of title losses. Both guys, I guess, maybe some negative takeaways and some positives. Like, I thought Poirier's grappling defense looked great against Islam Makhachev. I thought it was better than expected. I don't really think that's going to play a factor in this matchup because Holloway's just straight up not going to be shooting on him. I also thought his reaction time looked a little bit slowed. Now, it's also possible that like he was just so worried about the takedowns that his striking reaction time suffered because of that, but still not great. For Holloway, it's obviously not great that he had his chin cracked for the first time in that title fight, but I did think he was fighting a pretty decent fight up until he got caught. And like those shots that Ilya lands, like Ilya's power is just different. He's going to knock out, like with those strikes he's landed, he's going to knock out anyone who has ever weighed in at 145. Like, he landed that right hand. Holloway kind of ate it and was able to survive a little bit longer. You see Oliveira get hit with that right, and he's just like nuked right away. Obviously, it was a little bit different. Holloway was moving backwards. Oliveira coming into range, but still, it's been like 8 months since that fight. I still expect Holloway to have a very, very solid chin. I don't think all of a sudden he's just going to be like getting clipped and getting knocked out super easily. When I'm looking to pick a winner, the thing that really just like keeps coming into my mind was how impressive Max Holloway looked in that Justin Gaethje fight. Just fought so well. He was so light on his feet. He was defensively responsible. He moved in and out of range so effectively. I think a big thing we saw in that second fight against Dustin, and just like Max Holloway's overall evolution, is earlier on in his career, he was very willing to eat one to give one because he was so reliant on his durability. Even in some of those championship fights, like he just knew that his chin was so good, his cardio was so good that you were going to break down or fade before he was. Thought he fought with a super intelligent game plan. He mixed in the kicks so well. He also knew when to plant and kind of dig in and land those big shots against Justin Gaethje, like I mentioned. And so I think we're going to see Max Holloway go in there, and I think he's going to outpoint Dustin from the outside. I think he's going to use his full striking arsenal. Obviously, Dustin doesn't have comparable kicks to Max Holloway, and I don't think he's going to be significantly outgunned by Dustin's power. I still think Dustin's going to have the advantage. I think Dustin will land the more powerful shots, but I don't think it's going to be as extreme as the first matchup. And I am leaning towards a Max Holloway decision win. This is such a tough matchup because both these guys are so great. I think it's going to be a fun fight. I don't want either of them to lose, but Holloway by decision will be the pick. And that is going to wrap it up for my full card predictions. Probably a long one here, but 14 fights, pay-per-view. Let me hear your picks down below. Thank you all for stopping by, and I'll see you in the next one.